It's an argument about whether or not the right to privacy exceeds the right to security. That's what the whole issue is, right? I am a fan of the fact that we have the right to privacy. I love the fact that America has that right. If there's a threat in my neighborhood, if there's a potential terrorist living next door, guess how much I care about my right to privacy? 0. Check me out, guys. Like, whatever you want to know. You want to know what my favorite genre on Pornhub is? Come check it out. I've got nothing to hide. I'm not a terrorist. So I'm happy to disband my right to privacy. Want to see how many guns I have? Want to know how often I make love to my wife? Want to know what my favorite coffee is? Want to see what happens when I drink too much milk? Come on in. Like, I'm an open book. I want you to find the bad guy who's hiding among people like me, taking advantage of my right to privacy. That's what I want you to do, Mr. Police Officer. What happened with Snowden is we had the Patriot Act, all of these things were born from the realm of we need to find the enemy within us, because that enemy within us is taking advantage of the American right to privacy. They're manipulating it. There's no way that we're going to be able to find them if we continue to enforce the same right the same way. So are we going to do it perfectly the first time? Nope. But are we going to try to experiment with something? Yes. Right? And then when it was exposed to a larger court, exposed to a larger audience, of course people got upset with it, because what did they all think? They all thought, well, how much of my private information has been violated? Because there was never the thought of how many wolves hiding among you, wolves that eat wolves. How many of them have been caught and exposed? Because, yes, even if you're in your example of 20,000 people and 6 that were approved, even if 19,
not approved.
Yes, right. Even if 19,992 were approved without anybody giving it any just review, if they caught one bad guy that would have killed 10 Americans, was it worth it? I am pragmatic. I say yes.
I'm glad you put a visual on that on the end, because here's where it gets really cloudy to me. And look, I don't know if I'm right about anything or wrong about anything. This is actually a little bit of philosophy in some ways, because to your point, there's A or B, right? And there's good and bad that comes with it. But I look at that and you say, could have saved 10 Americans. Yeah, no one wants to see 10 Americans die. But also, what if the precedent that is set through allowing these things to occur then ensures that 5 million Americans live without freedom over the next 10 years. And of those 5 million, maybe 1,000 of them killed themselves because of it, whatever it is.
So living without...
Now, was it worth it?
Well, living without freedom is a pretty generalized statement, right? Living without the reasonable access to their own privacy, if that's what you're arguing...
Not necessarily.
Because freedom is a much larger thing than whether or not the police can expedite a wiretap against you without it getting proper vetting.
Let me expand upon that then. I'm glad you bring that up. You can let's put on the hat for a second of the conspiracy theorists who think that everything's an inside job, which you and I have already highlighted. That I don't think that at all.
Right.
I think things have a reasonable explanation. I don't know if we talked about that on the pod or before, so maybe that'll come up. But for those people, one place where they could have an argument in the grand scheme of things, not necessarily all these things that they claim are automatically set up by all these evil people who are lizard people no matter what. Not that. But when they talk about, they will come to you like Dick Cheney with Iraq. Goes to George Bush. Brilliant argument, got to tell you. And he says, Mr. President, what if there was a 1% chance that Saddam Hussein had WMDs? Wouldn't you want to make sure it was 0? Wouldn't that be enough to go in there? And he psychologically puts the president, who the buck stops with him, in a position where he goes, well, I don't want to be the guy who ignored that 1%. Fuck it, we're going to go in. Let's get him, right?
Right.
And he was already incentivized to do it. When you use psychology like that, but with COVID, if it can save but one life, we must do it to everyone, right? that's where I get nervous, because it's the same thing to me, unless I'm interpreting it wrong based on what you were trying to say. So correct me if I'm wrong from what you were getting at, but it's the same thing as when you say, but if this could have saved 10 Americans, it was worth it to me.
Yeah. So the way that it's different is because you're talking about a active step that Americans have to take action on themselves, right? So with COVID, for example, we're being forced to put a foreign substance into your system, right? You're being forced to take a vaccine. If you don't take the vaccine, then you are forced not to eat at the restaurants. You're forced not to go in the library. You're forced not to be able to ride public transit, whatever it might be, right? If you don't wear a mask, you're forced to change your life in some major way, right? So now that is essentially the government imposing its will on your everyday practices.
Yes.
It's completely different than what we're talking about with information, where you continue your daily practices. What actually changes is just the interpretation of who gets what rights supported at what time. So now, for example, why wasn't every American part of the collection effort? Because many of them, like with the collection effort that Project Stellar Wind.
Yeah.
Why didn't they just wiretap every American phone? Because they had a prioritization. We're looking for phones.
They technically did. Technically.
So what they did is they tapped into metadata.
Yes.
That's collected by everybody, which has never been claimed to be protected data at all. Metadata is actually data that belongs to the system that enabled the data exchange.
But they could also look into anything at any time.
After they had the metadata to dig into it further. Correct. But the prioritization of privacy violation, that went to a very specific few who fit the profile of a potential threat, or who fits the profile of what we think might be a potential threat. It takes 5 hours of analysis before you're like, oh, this is a dead lead. Ignore it, deprioritize it. We'll listen to somebody else instead. For me, it's not that I have to do something to save someone else. That's the argument with why you should get a vaccine, right? You should get a vaccine so that you don't accidentally pass the virus to somebody else, or so you don't pass the virus to somebody who passes the virus to somebody else, whatever that is, right? Now you're just infringing on my ability to carry out my own life. When behind the scenes, somebody looks at your metadata and they say that based on your metadata, it looks like you're having calls with somebody in Saudi Arabia. And then they look at your metadata and they're like, oh, it was one call from a spam account in Saudi Arabia trying to sell this person insurance. They're no longer a priority. So then they deprioritize you and move on. In my case, if that process of finding the person who's in constant contact with a suspicious number in Saudi Arabia, if that's what they're looking for, look all day long, because I want you to find that person. Because there's nothing I have to do to save anybody. Like, it's happening behind the scenes anyways. So it doesn't violate my ability. It doesn't violate my freedom of choice.
When they're using this is the pushback on this argument. And again, like, there's drawbacks, even if my vision were the one that were then carried out, there's drawbacks to it, because guess what? Like, those 10 Americans die, things like that, so I recognize that it's not like a 1 + 1 = 2 scenario. This is very much a, which part of the 50% are you putting the balance on? But like, the concept is that when they are then allowed to do that and you accept them doing that, where do they stop?
So here's my bigger question. Okay. What privacy is so important to you that you want to protect it at the cost of your American citizenship? At what point would you leave America and go become French? At what point would you leave America and go become Canadian? At what point is your privacy violated so excessively that it's not worth the security and the benefits that come from the state of the United States? That's the question I want to ask everybody who argues about privacy. Because the truth is, we're very much in a first world problem right now. Anywhere else in the world that you go, you have no right to privacy. Inside the United States, you have a great deal of right to privacy, and people will still, the courts and the Constitution have given the freedom to the government to explore, to technically go into your right of privacy through a court-approved system if they think that it will bring enhanced security to the state that they have created. So for all the people out there who are like, nobody should violate my right to privacy, you have the right to leave the United States. So when would you actually choose to leave? What is the thing that you're so worried about the government finding out that you would ever actually abandon your home in the United States and go somewhere else.
If the government could use I think for a lot of people, it's a hypothetical. I'll speak for myself there. Like, there's nothing I'd worry about right now, right? But what if in the future I were running a company or something, and like there were lives at stake? I don't know. It's hard for me to cook up a scenario, but there are plenty of scenarios of people a lot more powerful than me who do have to actively think about this. The connotation right there, and I'm making some leaps here, so it doesn't necessarily mean you meant this, but the connotation is that if you don't like it, go somewhere else, and you won't like it, you'll like it less because it's worse.
Correct.
Well, we're a nation of immigrants that was formed on people coming here to get the fuck away from places like that.
Correct.
To come here for those types of rights, for the things where governments live in a happy medium with their people instead of in control of their people.
That same population of immigrants has built the country that's here now.
Yes.
We've built a country that gives our executive power the right to do what they do, and our judicial power the power to do whatever they do.
But if you keep giving it more and more and more, you eventually become what you came from.
Which means that it's probably time to immigrate again.
Oh, fuck.